Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee with Craig. I am your host, Craig DeLuz. We're here talking about firearms policy, Second Amendment advocacy, you name it. We're talking about it right here on Coffee with Craig. Please make it a point to like and share this video feed so that your friends can join in the conversation. Also, subscribe to our YouTube channel. Like our Facebook page so that you can get the notices when we go live. So that way you can be involved in the conversation while it is happening. Check out the comments section. All sorts of fun stuff going on up in there. Also wanted to remind you guys, please remember to go to fpcgear.com. That's fpcgear.com. All sorts of cool stuff. Cool t-shirts that you can get that talk about your support for the Second Amendment, but don't just talk about it. You will actually be supporting your right to keep and bear arms because the proceeds from all of those sales go right back into the fight for your civil rights so you can look good and be effective looking good. That's fpcgear.com. Can't ask for more. All right. So you guys are all familiar with Heller, right? I'm assuming you know what Heller. When I say Heller, I don't have to go through the entire thing describing what Heller is. But you also know that since Heller, local municipalities, anti-gunners, and anti-gun courts have gone out of their way to try and find a way to get around Heller. Ignore it, skirt around it, whatever it is. Whether it deals with, their whole idea is that you don't have a right to ammunition. You don't have a right to purchase ammunition or own ammunition. You don't have a right to purchase or own whatever firearm you want. You don't have a right to have a firearm, possess a firearm outside of your home. They want to strictly limit the number of individuals or who actually can have a firearm and be able to have a firearm once again outside of their home. I mean, all sorts of ways, you name it, up to and including restricting the ability to actually be able to sell firearms. That's right. There are municipalities out there that are going out of their way to make sure that there is no way for someone to be able to purchase a firearm within their jurisdiction. And how do they do that? They do that by going after gun stores, right? Now, if you don't think that is a thing, because I know a lot of people are like, well, they could never do that. That's not really a thing. Well, let me just tell you, it is very much a thing. In fact, just recently, the mayor of Daly City made it a point to point that out for the city of San Francisco and for Daly City, exactly what their policies were designed to do. Check it out.
Ironically, both Daly City and San Francisco prohibit gun shops in our respective jurisdictions, yet it is frustrating that a loophole to this prohibition exists at the Cow Palace.
See, this was for a bill that would SB 221, which would eliminate gun shows at the Cow Palace. But what she noted right there was very, very important, that in Daly City and in San Francisco, they have policies that prohibit the opening of gun stores, that flat out prohibit it. Now you're saying to yourself, well, that's, well, how do they do that? Well, the way in which they do it are these zoning laws known as conditional use permits. Now, I first brought this to you when I was doing some work for the California Association of Federal Firearms Licensees, kind of the organization from which sprang the Firearms Policy Coalition. But when the city of Sacramento, the city in which I live, decided that they were going to institute such a program, they brought about reasons because, well, here are some of the reasons that they talk about. Now, some of them, well, let's be honest, to be quite honest, none of them are legitimate. But these are the reasons why they sought to institute these particular policies. Check this out.
Back in February, and even further back than that, the committee requested that staff take a look at several opportunities for us to reduce gun violence in our community. And in terms of what is existing in several other communities, the number one thing that we found cities doing, which kind of made sense for us, and that's the proposed ordinance you will be looking at today, is to, instead of having a regular retail permit for these stores, we would go to a conditional use permit. Several other questions were brought forth regarding liability insurance, regarding security, regarding minors coming into these facilities, and most of those are addressed at the federal level through alcohol, tobacco, firearms, and explosives, or at the state level through the Department of Justice. That allows us the flexibility to determine if we want to, as a city, require additional conditions.
To me, this is a step in a process of looking at firearms and ammunition. And I think you brought up some of the other issues that we talked about. I'd like to continue talking about those. What conditions are set, whether it's age or others, is certainly something that we'll deal with as we go. The theft piece, to me, is not the most important. It's really the concentration factor. And for me, it is about sending a statement as much as anything else that this is an important issue to us.
All right, so let's take a step back. Let's dissect what Mr. Jay Chenier, a city council member of City of Sacramento, is talking about. Now, the first person that talked in that clip was a staff person. And that particular staff person was noting that, things like, most of the restrictions, most of the things that they wanted to do, what they did was they had put together a report. And in this report that they put together, there were suggestions that came up, things that they could look at in order to pass, in order to address, quote unquote, gun violence, or to, let me clarify, what other cities were doing in the name of trying to prevent gun violence, right? So that's what the staff person was noting. Not only included in here was the idea of conditional use permits, meaning in order to open a gun store in the city of Sacramento, you have to get a special use permit. You have to apply for a special permit. But on top of that, it included other things, like getting a law enforcement permit, meaning you'd have to go to the police chief. You'd have to get a permit from the police chief. You'd have to have background checks for all of your employees, which in order to get a COE, you got to do background checks for your gun store, for your employees. But things like requiring additional insurance, liability insurance, even though there's absolutely there is no danger, there's no crime or anything relating to these particular stores. Even in the city of Sacramento, I don't know what the heck it is they're talking about. I don't know what it is that they're talking about in this particular case. They want them to have, additional security, to hire additional security, ignoring the fact that many employees within gun stores actually have firearms on their hips and are trained on how to utilize those firearms. I don't get exactly what it is that they're doing, but the whole, limiting the age of individuals who are able to go into a gun store, as if these gun stores are selling firearms to minors. I mean, just kind of asinine stuff. But then at the end, Jay Chenier really gave it away. And that is, their goal is to send a message, not to prevent gun violence, but a message that we don't like guns. Because law enforcement, even some of the members, even at least one member of the city council, really questioned whether or not gun stores were the problem. In all of the study, one of the things that was noted was gun stores were not the problem. Even here, check out as the police chief or the former police chief of the city of Sacramento even denotes that, I'm sorry, but gun stores are not the problem.
First and foremost was, what's the problem? And I think that's right on there where you said gun violence. And one of the biggest problems that we have is gun thefts. And it's not with the commercial establishments, it's more residential.
When's the last time we had a gun store, a theft, or even a robbery of a gun store in the city limits?
There's been none within the last 5 years. You'd have to go back over a decade.
I was going back and thinking, I can't remember 20 years, maybe the old Armour, maybe if that even happened in the 80s, but I can't think of anything that happens about the increased security. But are we going to ask people to have security guards when they have, alarms and everything else in place there? But another concern I have also was about the minors on the premises, under 18 as an adult, and I have some concerns, given that we have people that go to war, serve this country, or even we have people that serve law enforcement that are 18 and under 21 that can serve, and they can't go into a gun store. I mean, there might be certain exclusions from that, but how do you apply that across the board, and the people can't go in there?
I really believe that this ordinance is a solution looking for a problem. I believe has already been brought up by the representative from the Sacramento Police Department that we're not dealing with an issue of firearm thefts from dealers. In our desire to do something to curb gun violence, we're doing the one thing that we can, which, oh, by the way, does absolutely nothing to curb gun violence. In fact, what this ordinance does, in its best case scenario, if implemented constitutionally and done appropriately, will not reduce gun violence, but all it will do is create additional paperwork and put additional onus on one segment of Sacramento's business community. If implemented improperly, could result in numerous lawsuits and litigation. I think some of the things that have been brought up earlier, some of the proposals brought up from the February 21st report, which were deemed as or stated to be legally defensible, are in fact not constitutionally defensible. There is no upside to this particular ordinance, with the exception of to point out that we don't like guns. So, and that's really it. Jay Chenier said as much. It sends a message. The message that it sends is, we don't like guns. But then you go back to the mayor of Daly City and you realize that it's far more insidious. It's more than just saying we don't like guns. It's saying we are not going to allow you to exercise your right to own a firearm by making sure that you can't obtain one. You cannot legally obtain one. That's their goal, is to make sure that law-abiding citizens can't purchase firearms. And the worst part about it is that the courts, at least the Ninth Circuit, seems to be backing them up. We have a case that we're working on, a case called Teixeira versus the County of Alameda, where they have a zoning requirement such that no new gun store in the entire unincorporated county within Alameda County can open. There is no place in the unincorporated county of Alameda where a new gun store can open. These are two guys. One was previously owned a gun store. They passed all the background checks. They found a facility, and the problem was that it was within 500 feet of a residence. Now, mind you, the code did say 500 feet from the door. So they were good on that. But then they went there, once people realized that that the facility was actually good, they went back and they said, no, 500 feet from the closest part of the building. So then they found, they measured it from the back corner of the building where there isn't a door, the back corner of the building, right? And then they went across a 6-lane highway or 12-lane highway, a raised highway. On the other side of that highway, there's a residence. And they said, nope, you don't meet the definition. And the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals has basically said, yeah, no. You have, there is no constitutional right to sell firearms. And the Supreme Court, as it is currently constituted, refused to hear the case. Folks, this is one of the reasons why whoever becomes the next Supreme Court justice is so vitally important. Because we need the Supreme Court to take up these cases. They have not taken up a case since McDonald, which was in 2010. We just celebrated the 10th anniversary of Heller. We're celebrating the 8th anniversary of McDonald. But we haven't seen, in 8 years, we have not seen a Second Amendment case. And we keep seeing some really vital issues being ignored. This being one. The constitutional right to be able to facilitate the right to keep and bear arms. You see them going after firing ranges, shooting ranges. You see them going after gun stores. They're going after ammunition. They're going after our ability to be able to purchase firearms that are safe and in common use in other states. They are nibbling away at the Second Amendment, at the edges of the Second Amendment, completely and utterly ignoring Heller. And that's the reason why it is so vitally important that we make sure that President Trump puts someone in there who is a strong supporter of the Second Amendment. From what I've seen, the people who are there, they are, but we need to, once again, we need to make sure that we have that conversation, because the question is, at this point is, we know the Ninth Circuit doesn't care. The question is, does the Supreme Court care? And if it doesn't care as constantly constituted, then how do we make it care? So that they're not able to take away our constitutional right to keep and bear arms by eliminating the right to be able to sell firearms. Anyway, folks, that's going to be it for today's Coffee with Craig. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you so much for liking and sharing these videos and telling your friends about the Firearms Policy Coalition. We are the home in the fight for civil rights. Got to use them or you're going to lose them. You guys take care.
If you like our videos, follow, subscribe, like, and share.